Welcome to the 60th anniversary celebration of the Danielsen Institute and the 5th Merle Jordan Conference. The Skillful Soul of the Psychotherapist, Master Clinicians and Theologians in Dialogue. This conference is sponsored by the Merle Jordan Conference Fund and by the Meta-Nexus Institute through a grant from the John Templeton Foundation. I'm George Stavros. I'm the Executive Director of the Danielsen Institute. And we want to welcome all of you to Boston University. I want to accomplish a couple of things with these opening remarks. The first will be to say something about why we're here. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to make an introduction, and that introduction is to Dr. Merle Jordan. So, Merle Jordan is Professor Emeritus of Pastoral Psychology at Boston University, where he worked from 1969 to his retirement in 1996, serving as Executive Director of the Danielsen Institute from 1972 to 1981. Dr. Jordan is a pioneer and a leader in the field of the integration of spirituality and psychotherapy. He has published widely on the topic, including books Taking on the Gods, The Task of the Pastoral Counselor, Reclaiming Your Story, the Family History and Spiritual Growth, and Addiction and Spirituality, a multidisciplinary approach, which he co-edited with Oliver Morgan. Many of us here count Merle as a foundational, formational center of gravity in our vocations as psychotherapists. Psychotherapists who are specially trained to consider, understand, value, and explore the depth spiritual lives of our clients. It was Merle who taught us to formulate the ways in which each client's developmental history and trauma played out implicit theological dramas that needed to both be told and often rewritten. It was Merle who encouraged us to courageously take on the idolatrous gods of our patients that fueled the addiction, self-hatred, self-injury, and dissociation from which so many were suffering. This conference is a tribute to Merle Jordan and the impact he has had as a teacher, supervisor, mentor, and master clinician. And we welcome him and his wife, Barbara, and their family and friends. Thank you, Merle. The second thing I'd like to do with the opening remarks is to say a few words about what we're doing here, at least for the next day and a half. And in order to do this, I have to first confess something. This will perhaps be the most self-serving conference you've ever attended. What I mean by that is that our committee's approach to the conference was to think of master clinicians whose work we draw upon most frequently and utilize in the therapy rooms, the supervision sessions, and the training seminars at the Danielsen Institute. And then to invite these clinicians here today and tomorrow to talk with us and with you. We ask them to talk not only about psychotherapy, however, we ask them to talk about themselves. For us, this was the psychotherapy version of being kids in the candy store. Let me offer a few examples to illustrate what I'm talking about. Just in the last couple of weeks, I've had conversations with both supervisees and clients about Salman Akhtar's 4 versions of happiness. I've passed along an interview with Dr. Akhtar in which he talks about it taking at least 14 good years of training in order to become a psychotherapist. When I handed that to our psychiatric resident this year, he blanched. Nancy McWilliams' book on psychoanalytic case formulation is the foundation of our training and orientation for our own training program in psychodynamic formulation. and was used extensively over the past month as we brought in our new training class. And I just had a conversation last week with a colleague, another center director, about her critique of managed care as those storm clouds begin to form again on the horizon of mental health. David Wallen's book on attachment and psychotherapy, Intersubjectivity, is something that our own training director, David Rupert, used 2 weeks ago in our relational therapy seminar. So these people are with us all the time anyway, and it's hard to believe we actually have them here in one place and get to spend the next 2 days with them. So the one special item we've thrown into the mix in this invitation relates to the Danielsens' unique mission of serving and training and researching in the space that opens up when psychology and religion are brought into conversation with one another. We have asked 3 prominent master clinicians and scholars, Salman Akhtar, Nancy McWilliams, and David Wallen, to help us understand whether and how their own personal, religious, and spiritual development, experiences, and beliefs have influenced and been influenced by their work as psychotherapists. Each of them has bravely consented to our request that they speak about themselves, their ideas, their work in this way, and after doing so, to be joined by a distinguished group of respondents to further that discussion. These discussions will mirror one of the core seminars that we have at the Danielsen Institute, where training fellows and training faculty meet weekly to ask one another these very same questions. One of the main reasons we've structured the day and a half in this way is because we believe that we learn a lot about being psychotherapists by learning about ourselves and each other as psychotherapists. Why we think, feel, believe, and ultimately practice in the way that we do. The next day and a half will give us the opportunity to do this with some of the finest that psychotherapy has to offer. Finally, I want to briefly say something about who is here. Through the great efforts of our conference committee and our expert technical staff, we are going to be joined in a live webcast by people from over 27 states, Washington, D.C., Canada, and even the Czech Republic. We welcome all of you who are watching today. We are also joined by over 50 current and former Danielsen trainees and clinicians who are here to honor Merle. We are joined by deans, faculty members, students from our home institution of Boston University and its schools of theology, education, social work, clinical psychology, medicine, and graduate school, as well as faculty and students from academic and training programs throughout Greater Boston and nationally. We're joined by psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists, marriage and family therapists, mental health counselors, spiritual directors, clergy, people active in the ministry, and people who are just interested in what happens when people talk about psychology and religion at the same time. We're joined by members of the Danielsen Institute Board of Governors, including our chairman, Dan Boyd, who is watching from his home in North Carolina. Welcome, Dan. Dan Boyd is the nephew of Albert and Jessie Danielsen, our visionary and great benefactors at the Danielsen Institute. We are joined by 3 former executive directors of the Danielsen Institute. At least we will be over the next 2 days. Merle Jordan, Carol Bond, and Nancy Dever. Each of you has provided the finest and wisest leadership, often under difficult circumstances, guiding and shepherding the Danielsen in meeting its unique mission. We also want to acknowledge the loss of a former executive director and treasured colleague, Homer Jernigan, who passed away last year. May his memory be eternal. Finally, before I introduce Dr. Akhtar, I have just a few housekeeping things and requests to make of you. First, if it's at all possible, I mean, unless you're on call and you just absolutely have to have your phone on, there are more wireless signals passing through this room than at NASA. And we need to try and keep those things to a minimum. So if you can shut off your phones, that would be ideal. Second, there will be time for questions from the audience after all the presenters have presented and a brief discussion has taken place. So please wait on your questions until we have 2 mic runners who can come get you the microphone so that your question can be picked up on the web stream. And finally, for those of you who are going to get continuing education credits for today, take your filled out evaluations outside to the registration table at 5 o'clock, and you'll get the paperwork that you need there. So that's all for the housekeeping. Now I'd like to make another introduction. Salman Akhtar is professor of psychiatry and human behavior at Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia and training and supervising analyst at the Psychoanalytic Center of Philadelphia. He received his medical degree in India and came to the United States in 1973, completing his residency training and training as a psychoanalyst. He is a prolific author of many scholarly articles and books. I can't even begin to list them all, but a few of the titles include The Wound of Mortality, Inner Torment, Objects of Our Desire, Turning Points in Dynamic Psychotherapy. He's also editor of the inquisitively titled Does God Help? His research and clinical interests include personality disorders, long-term effects of childhood trauma, immigration and exile and psychoanalysis, and hopefully with some priming from us, religion and spirituality. He's the recipient of many awards, including the Best Paper of the Year and Edith Sabshin Award from the American Psychoanalytic Association and the Sigmund Freud Award for Distinguished Contribution to Psychoanalysis by the American Society of Psychoanalytic Physicians. Dr. Akhtar, we are so pleased to have you with us.